These are the recommended tools that you're going to need in order to put it together. Now, you're going to need a motorcycle stand, either a hydraulic motorcycle stand or a stationary one like this, because we're going to have a point where we're going to need to balance the bike on this to be able to put the front wheel and the fender on. So this is a must-have and something very important. If you don't have one of these, please don't attempt to assemble this at home. It's going to be pretty difficult for you to balance the bike and put the front wheel on at the same time. It's not going to be possible for you to have someone holding the bike up while you try to do those steps. You're going to want a power drill to be able to remove the screws from the front of the pallet. You could do it with a screwdriver, but it's going to be fairly difficult to do it that way. You want a rubber mallet, a 15mm wrench, an 8mm wrench, a 13mm socket, a 6mm hex wrench, a 5, and a 4mm hex wrench. These are the tools you're going to need to finish the assembly. So make sure you've got these before we get started. When you take the box top off, you're going to see your bike in protective packaging. You're going to want to remove each of these straps first to take the tire off, and then take off the protective foam wrapping on the bike. Leave these two straps at the back until the very end. Those are going to help secure your bike while we do the initial steps. Note that both these straps here and these straps here have the bike under tension. So when you release these straps, the suspension is going to come up. So if you're standing on top of it while you're cutting the straps, the bike is going to spring up. So watch out for that. It is safe just to stand back and cut these, and the suspension will suspend up to its original place. So in the box, along with your certificate of origin and your notice to show you the instructions, will be your power cord, your pedal shafts to add on to your bike. We'll show you that later on in the assembly video. Your pedals and your mirrors that will mount to the top of your brake masters. Follow the QR code link on the instructions, on the instruction sheet that's included with this, and use that to access the full assembly videos and the user manual. So once you remove most of the packaging from your bike, again, keeping the two back straps holding the rear of the bike in place on the pallet, we're going to go ahead and install the handlebars, because our bike is still secure against the pallet and it's a good time for us to do this. So we've removed all the other packaging. There's still just a little bit of cardboard here from where the strap was going over the front fork. So we're going to remove these top stem caps, remove the cardboard. We're just going to bring the handlebar up and position it in place. We're going to then take the handlebar clamp caps and again just get them finger started. And then we can get them mostly tight with our 6mm hex wrench. If I want to just get a couple of them tight, not tight, but just starting to be tight, you'll notice that there's some markings on your handlebar here, and you should be able to see the markings on both sides to tell you that the handlebar is centered. If you can only see the numbers on one side, it means your handlebar is too far to the left or to the right. So center those to the middle, and then finish tightening the bar. We're going to turn it just to tighten it down. Now you're going to want to get this really tight, but it's going to be best again to check it when you've got the bike stood up and on its wheels, so that you can move the handlebar back and forward towards the position that's comfortable for you, more towards the rider or more away from the rider. So if you want to just get this to this level where it's still movable, but it's secure so that you can lift the bike from it, this is a good place for it to be. Same with the display. I can now tilt the display towards or away from me, depending on where I want it. And again, it's going to be best to do this once you're sat and you're on the bike. The display can be tightened with these 4 bolts right here, and again on the back to move it forward and back. There's 2 bolts underneath the display that you can tighten or loosen to allow it to be adjusted. Once we've got all the straps off, we've got the handlebars secured, the last thing that we're going to do is to remove the wood that's holding the front axle in place. Now it's good to have a friend keeping the bike stable while we're doing this, because this block may not be enough to hold the whole weight of the bike. So it's good to have somebody holding the bike stable and secure while we remove these screws, because after this there's nothing holding the bike up on its own. You can do this with a screwdriver, but we recommend using a power drill because it's going to make this step a lot faster. We're going to do this for all 4 screws, and that will remove this piece of wood off the top, and we'll remove the cap after, and the bike will be ready to remove off the pallet. Now that we have the wood taken off the front, we want to make sure that we've always got a hand on the bike because it might not be stable. Using the help of a friend, we want to move the bike onto a bike stand and secure it so we're ready for the next steps. Now we're going to show putting it on a motorcycle stand. You're going to need a friend for this because this is a very heavy bike. You want to get it up onto the stand and centered in the middle.
No, the kickstand first.
Right. This is good to be doing here. The kickstand has to be down. Come to the center, and it's going to rest right here on the 2 motor plates on either side. You'll be able to find a balance point here, and the bike can basically rest on the back. For added security, you can put another strap around here, around the seat and around the stand, just to secure it to the stand. With your bike on the stand, it's now time to mount our fender. Now the only difference between the Voodoo and the Ghost is the design of the fender. The Voodoo is designed to mount on this over-the-tire fender bracket. The Ghost is a high-mounted fender that mounts to these 4 bolt points right underneath the triple tree. For the Ghost, you would just remove the 4 screws from the bottom and washers and mount directly up into the triple tree. For the Voodoo, we're going to use the 4 supply bolts and washers to mount directly to this point here. So all I'm going to do is undo each screw, and I'm going to mount a washer on either side, one from the bottom and one from the top. I'll mount them through these holes first, put it up through the bike, put the washer on there, and I'm going to get each one finger tight first, and I'm going to follow through with an 8mm wrench and a 4mm hex wrench from below. And I'm just going to finish tightening all of these. I'm going to do that to all 4 corners, and I'll have my fender mounted. Now that you've got your bike secured and it's on a bike stand, we want to make sure that we're able to pull on the bike and it's very secure, because we're going to be moving this around quite a bit. Again, we really don't recommend you doing this unless you feel like you have the skills to mount a motorcycle wheel to a motorcycle fork. We do recommend you taking this to a certified motorcycle mechanic to make sure that this is on and that you're safe to ride. If you are trying to do this at home, we're going to show you how we do this. So the first thing that we want to do is make sure that we've got enough room in our brake caliper to be able to fit our brake disc in there when we mount the wheel. Because sometimes in shipping this space closes and we don't have enough space anymore. So you can see here we have an adequate amount of space. So now I'm going to go ahead and start to mount the wheel. We have two spacers, a longer one and a shorter one. The longer one goes on the disc side. The shorter one goes on the non-disc side. Okay, now we're going to move in and we're going to start to mount this. Now, we recommend you having a friend to help you out with this because we have to line up both sides. What we're going to do, we're going to put the spacer on the long side, mount it into the disc, and put the spacer on the short side using your friend's help to line it up into the axle space. So we want to make sure that we can look through right through here and see the alignment of the axles through so that we can take our axle and start to pass it through the hole. Once we've got our axle started, we'll start to be able to push it through the wheel, and we will feel as it starts to move through all of the different wheel spacers that we have lined up. Once it's all lined up, I'm going to be able to keep pushing it through. I'm going to want to line it up with the wider piece here. Using a rubber mallet with the screw of the axle somewhat facing out. Just give it a few gentle taps. Take it the rest of the way until the axle is flush with the side of the fork. Once the axle's in place, I'm just going to add the bolts on either side, making sure that I've got the washers as well. I'm just going to get them finger tight. Once the axle is now in place, we just have to tighten the screws on either side, again using our 5mm hex wrench. The final step will be tightening these screws on the top of the axle, just to make sure that the axle is secure. So using a 5mm Allen key, I'm just tightening these down snug, and then making sure that they're extra secure. And then your front wheel should be good to go. Okay, in this last step here, we're going to show you how to install your pedals and your crank arms onto your Voodoo or Ghost. Tools you're going to need are a 13mm socket wrench, a 5mm hex wrench, and a 15mm wrench. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to get the pedal started into the crank arm. So we're just going to get it started until it just hangs. Then we're going to loosen the nut on the crank arm mount. This is the crankshaft here. And we're just going to slide the pedal in. Now it's squared, so we can kind of mount any way, right? And just get it started. And put the nut back in the middle. And then using our 13mm socket, we'll tighten it on. Now the crank arms and pedals on your Voodoo or Ghost, you can choose to mount them in opposing directions so that they will turn and so that you can move them as you would pedals on a bicycle, or you can actually choose to mount them in the exact same direction on either side, and in that way they'll act more like traditional motorcycle pegs. Underneath here, if you look up from the bottom of the bike, using your 5mm hex wrench, there's actually some adjustment screws where if you loosen them or tighten them, if I tighten these down quite a bit, they actually tighten down on the crank arm, making it difficult to move these. So they will act a little bit more like motorcycle pegs if you do decide to tighten these down. In this video, we're going to do a walkthrough of the handlebar controls on your Voodoo or Ghost. So starting off on the right hand side here, we have your throttle. The throttle is used to make your bike run. It should be able to turn. It's a full twist throttle. It's about a quarter twist, and it should return each time. Next up, we have the keys. So your Voodoo or Ghost has the added security of being able to take the key on your way when you're not using the bike. When I put the key in and turn it on, it will turn on the daytime running lights of the bike. It'll turn on the tail lights, but it won't yet turn on the display. We're going to show you how to activate the display in a moment, but the keys will prepare the display for being able to turn on and turn the rest of the bike on and be ready to ride. On the right hand side of the handlebar here is your front brake lever. This is more like a traditional motorcycle where the front brake would be on your right hand side, and typically you would have the clutch on your left. So here we've kept the front brake on the right. Now, typical lever pull to actuate the brakes. There is a dial here to be able to turn it in or out to move the handle closer to you by turning it away from you or turning it towards you to move the lever away, to put the brake lever in a more comfortable position for you. Now careful in turning it too close so that it doesn't run into the other handlebar controls when you bring it in. And then the viewing glass to be able to see how much hydraulic fluid is in there. And there's a minimum and maximum line on the front of the bike. So when the bike is at a level plane, you can look across and see how much brake fluid is left in the lever. In the middle here, this is your display. Just going to turn it on to show you what it is. This is an APT 750C display, but it has been designed specifically for the Lyric, Voodoo, and Ghost. So please, if you are ever replacing this display, don't just buy an off-the-shelf unit because it won't work for your bike. On the display, we have the time at the top. We have your remaining power, and you can view this in either the percentage left in the battery bars or the voltage of the battery. Now, knowing the voltage of this bike runs between 84 volts and it's dead at 61 volts. On the right here, you've got your miles or kilometers per hour. In the middle is your settings between 1 and 3 for your power settings. And on the right is your power and wattage that you're using. And then down below is either your trip or odometer for this. Using the display, you're going to be able to get into the features menu to be able to change things like between miles and kilometers per hour, be able to change the clock, and be able to change how you want to view your remaining percentage of battery life. Now, you may notice when you first unboxed your bike and you've got your bike out and potentially you're out in the sun that it looks like there's some scratches on your display. There's actually a protective coating on your display, and if you were to want to remove that, it peels off, and you'll notice that underneath the display doesn't have any scratches. So you can decide to keep this on there as a protective coating for the display, or you can peel it off and remove it if you want the more clear screen. On the left-hand side here, we're going to go through the controls that you've got. So starting with the display controls. This is the power button here. This turns the display on and off. If you've already got your display on, you can just use the keys when you're done riding to turn it off, or if you want to keep the lights on your bike, you can use the power to turn it off. We've kept those separate so that for any of the folks that want to enter a password to start their display as an added security feature, you can then do that by turning the key on, and then you can turn the display on and have that password come up to be able to enter that. We've got the plus and minus buttons here to change between the different assist levels that you have. Those assist levels are effective on both the throttle, on the throttle levels. And then the menu button, which in the regular screen sort of toggles between different selections, or when you double click the menu button, it goes into the menu and you'll be able to select things from there. Underneath the display buttons is the power level setting button. The power level is what allows us to switch between what would be a legal e-bike mode and the unlimited off-road mode of the bike. When the button is clicked on, the bike is going to be limited to 750 watts and is not going to travel faster than 20 miles per hour. When the button is switched off, the Voodoo can access its full potential and its unlimited power, and this is for off-road situations only, and you will be able to reach the full speeds of the bike. And then here we've got all of the different light switches. So the button below here is what will turn on the lights. So when you turn on your ignition, the daytime running lights will start and the tail lights will start. If you want to use the headlights, you have to first turn the headlight system on and then use either the high beam or the low beam setting. So this is the low beam and this would be the high beam. At the very bottom we have the horn, and just above that we have the turn signals. Now note that you do have to move it back towards the middle to cancel the turn signals. So I'll turn them on and back towards the middle to cancel them off. In this video we're going to show you how to charge your Voodoo or Ghost. So your bike comes with an onboard charger and the capabilities of charging at either an EV station through the J1772 port on the top, or at any regular 110 volt outlet using the port in front and the supply power cable. So all I'm going to do is take the cable when I'm charging this at home or somewhere else where there's a 110 volt outlet. I'm going to plug it into the front of the tank through the port. I'm going to take the other end and plug it into the wall. Okay, when I plug the charger in, you're going to hear the fan start. It'll stop, and then it'll start again. When you hear the fan running, the bike is charging. When you hear the fan stop, it's no longer charging anymore. In this video, we're going to show you how to remove your battery from your Voodoo or Ghost. So step one, you're going to want to unplug the power from the Anderson cable down below. So grabbing firmly onto the connector, I'm just going to pull straight out and my battery is disconnected. Now I'm going to remove the 4 thumb screws on either side, and I'm just going to turn those out, remove those, and from there the tank cover can be taken off. I'll unplug it from the onboard charger. So now you're going to want to get into the battery compartment. If you've locked your battery compartment, you're going to want to use your key to unlock the battery compartment itself. And then use the button to open it up. Now, undo the Velcro strap on the battery. And from here, I'm going to tip the front of the battery up first. I'm going to use a hand under the front of the battery just to make sure that I've tipped it at the right angle. And from here, we're just going to lift the battery up and out of the bike, making sure that I remove the cables from there. So now going back the other way, we're going to put our battery back into the bike. First, we're going to grab the Velcro strap, pull it up into the position that we need. We're going to tip the battery backwards into the bike, and we're going to put the power cord back down through the back of the bike. Reach down and just make sure that that's pulled through. Put the battery down into its place. And then I'm going to take the battery and then just lower it back down into place. Now we're just going to make sure that the battery is slid all the way back towards the back of the battery compartment, just to give us enough room at the front for the latch to close. Then take the Velcro strap. We're going to put it back around the battery. Tighten it down so it's snug in there. Close the compartment and lock it again if you've for locking it. Now we're going to put the cover back on. To do that, first we're going to make sure we plug it in. Position it back over the holes. Just get them started. And do that in all four corners. Okay. Now I just tighten them and we can be on our way. Last step, we're going to take the Anderson connector and we're going to plug it back into the bike. Now, this is a 72 volt battery, and so you will expect sometimes to see a bit of a spark come out. That's completely normal. Plug it in. Make sure it's made complete contact and we're ready to go. So we're going to show you how to adjust your Fast-Ace front fork suspension. Using the dial on the top, you can turn this either to the left for slower compression or to the right for faster compression. Now you're going to have to remove your handlebars first to be able to access these screws, and there's one on either side of the fork. You want to make sure that you've adjusted it to the same level on each fork. And the best way to do that is to turn it all the way, one way, till it doesn't turn anymore. And then when you're going back, count the number of clicks. You'll be able to feel those clicks as you go through. 1, 2, 3. Now there's an adjuster on the bottom of the fork leg as well. I've got this fork leg out right now for ease of showing you in this video. You're going to actually have to crawl under your bike to be able to access this. There's a rubber cap here, and just using a screwdriver you'll be able to pry out the rubber cap and take it off to access the screw down below. Now this is actually going to dial in the compression of the fork. So going one way or another, you'll actually feel it move to either somewhat stiffer suspension versus lighter suspension. So going all the way clockwise, I'm going to feel even stiffer suspension. And going counterclockwise, I'll feel lighter suspension. When I've dialed the fork leg all the way towards the slow setting on the rebound, you'll notice that the leg responds and comes back up slowly. Versus if I dial it all the way towards fast, it comes up quicker. Now you want to dial this in for the perfect setting and the feeling for yourself and what you like your fork to feel like. Now to adjust the back suspension or the rear suspension on your Voodoo or Ghost, there's a number of different settings in your Fast-Ace suspension at the rear. Your bike comes with a coilover shock, and it is an air shock as well. So first, there's an air cap here where you can unscrew this, and using a shock pump, please, you don't attach this to a bike pump, but using a shock pump, you can attach a shock pump to this and dial up or down the air pressure depending on the weight of the rider or riders if you're riding often with a passenger. This will add a lot more compression or reduce the compression depending on whether you're adding air or reducing air in there. Again, this is personal feel, so you can adjust this to make sure that you're feeling the compression that you want. You can also add some preload to the spring. Now you would actually have to take the shock out of here. Using a shock wrench at the top, you can dial down the preload of the spring to add compression to the spring to stiffen the rear. Out of the factory here, we've got it dialed in fairly soft, but you can, if you're a heavier rider or you're riding often with a passenger, you may want to take this out and dial that down. Finally, there's a dial down below here. And from the back of the bike facing forward, if I'm where I'm sitting right now, if I'm dialing this towards myself, I'm making it a faster rebound, or if I'm dialing it away from myself right now, it's a slower rebound. You'll see on the dial there's an S and an F, and it's similar to the front fork. It just changes the speed, the rebound speed that this comes in and out to dial in the suspension to your own feeling. In this video, we're going to talk about chain tension on your Voodoo or Ghost. Now, having the proper chain tension is going to make your ride more enjoyable, and it's going to make your machine sound and perform better. Now, if you look at the chain tension here, you can see that we get quite a lot of movement. Now, this is typical in, say, dirt bikes, but it's not what we would expect for the Voodoo or Ghost. This is actually too much movement. The chain is meant to ride on the chain guide that sits on top of the swing arm here. But we don't want to have this much movement. This is about more than kind of 1.5 inches of movement here. So the way that we get rid of this is we want to loosen up the back wheel, which I've done this ahead of time, but you would do this with 22 millimeter wrench or 22 millimeter socket. Okay, and we just loosen up the back block here. And these screws here are made to tension the chain. So as we go through here, we can just turn these in, and you'll see as I'm moving those, the chain starts to have a lot more tension. Okay? So I just move it in until I've got about 1/4 inch worth of tension here, which is about where we're at right now. Now again, the chain is still riding on the chain slider, which it's meant to. Okay? And right about here is perfect. Now, you want to make sure, and looking from the back of the bike as well, that the wheel is still straight, because you don't want to tighten this too much and take the wheel out of straight. We do recommend that you bring this to a certified motorcycle mechanic to do, because you can put your back wheel out of alignment if you don't have it straight, which can make your tire wear funny. Okay, just like that, you're done building your Voodoo or Ghost. Just a few quick checks before you take it on the road. Turn on the keys, check all your lights, make sure that your turn signals are working. Make sure that your headlight is facing in the direction that you want. You can tilt it up and down. You may need to loosen the bolts just to get it projected in the right direction. Make sure your horn is working and it's active. Okay. Make sure your kickstand is working. Everything's good to go. Be safe out there.